All right, welcome everyone to this deep dive. Today we're going deep into a topic you might not hear about every day.
Yeah.
Men's issues and the support systems, or sometimes lack thereof.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially focusing on underserved communities.
Right.
We've got a lot to dig into today, so buckle up.
Looking forward to it.
We've got information on this really cool organization, the Men's Resource Center. They call it MRC for short.
Oh, yeah, the MRC.
And then we're going to talk about some broader societal trends that sort of tie into this whole thing.
The big picture stuff.
Yep. And then we've got some statistics that, honestly, when I saw them, kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have, a much clearer picture of this whole issue that, honestly, gets overlooked way too often.
It really does.
So first up, let's talk about this Men's Resource Center.
Okay.
The MRC, what really struck me going through all this material is, their whole approach. They're not just about, fixing problems.
Right.
It's more about empowering men, really helping them build these fulfilling lives.
Totally. And you hit the nail on the head there.
Did I?
The MRC, they focus on some really key areas.
Yeah. What are some of those?
So you've got emotional regulation.
Oh, okay.
But it's not just about, anger management, right? It's about taking that energy, that emotional energy, and channeling it into something positive.
So sort of transforming it.
Yeah, exactly. Transforming it.
Okay, interesting. What else?
And then obviously mental health support is huge.
Of course.
Breaking down the stigma around that, offering a safe space for men to actually talk about what they're going through.
Which can be tough.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with all those, traditional ideas about what it means to be a man.
Yeah, that whole man up thing.
Exactly. It's finally someone's giving men permission to actually be human.
Right. It's okay to feel stuff.
Exactly.
It's okay to not be okay.
To not have it all figured out.
Yeah, and they don't just stop at, talking about feelings and stuff.
Oh, not at all.
They actually go a step further.
Oh, yeah, they're big on skills development.
What kind of skills?
All sorts. They offer practical tools for success in life, in work.
Oh, okay.
So, job readiness training, financial literacy workshops.
Stuff you actually need to know.
Exactly, the real world stuff.
So it's a holistic approach.
Exactly.
I was really impressed with their focus on community and accountability.
That's a big one.
It's they create this brotherhood approach.
Which
I think is so smart because it combats that, sense of isolation that a lot of men feel.
It's so true.
And they encourage guys to, actually support each other, which is...
Yeah, lift each other up.
Which is huge. And then they don't just stop there.
No, they take it a step further.
They recognize how important family is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they offer support for fathers, partners.
Building stronger families, building stronger communities.
Yeah, helping them, strengthen their relationships, work on their communication skills.
Communication is key.
It's they get it,
They really do.
They get that all these things are connected.
It's a holistic approach, right?
It is, and it's inspiring work, for sure.
It is.
But it kind of makes you wonder, why is an organization like this even necessary? What happened in our society that created this, gap in support for men?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And to answer that, we really need to look back kind of at the historical context.
Okay, way back.
Yeah, at some point, there was a pretty significant shift, moving away from men's needs.
A shift in focus.
Yeah, to prioritize the needs of women and children.
And, rightfully so, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
The women's rights movement, huge turning point, brought much needed attention to all those inequalities that women have been facing for, centuries.
Centuries, absolutely.
So, yeah, that was a necessary shift.
For sure.
But as awareness of those needs grew for women and children,
right,
the need for services to support them grew too.
Yeah, naturally.
So funding, resources, all that stuff got directed towards those areas.
The newly recognized areas?
Which, inadvertently left fewer resources for programs that had traditionally served men.
It's like that pendulum swing, right?
That's a great way to put it.
You need to correct the imbalance.
Yeah.
But maybe it swung a little too far in the other direction.
And created a whole new gap in the process.
Exactly.
And it's not just that. This shift coincided with, a bunch of other changes happening in society.
It's that perfect storm.
Yeah, think about the economy.
Yeah.
All those traditional, male-dominated industries declining.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, those kinds of things. And then you've got, the media...
Shaping perceptions?
Public perceptions starting to focus more on, the struggles of women and children.
Right.
And often portraying men as, like, the source of those
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah, painting a certain picture.
Yeah, it's like this whole narrative shifted.
It did.
So, yeah, you've got all these factors coming together. It's no wonder men's issues kind of got, like, pushed to the side.
And that expectation, right?
Yeah.
For men to just, man up.
Ugh, I hate that phrase.
Don't complain, just deal with it.
Yeah, like, suck it up.
It only made things worse, pushing them further into silence.
Making them less likely to reach out for help.
Exactly. So this shift, right?
Yeah.
It was positive in many ways for women and children,
Definitely.
but unintentionally, it created this gap in support for men.
Especially, like you said, those in underserved communities.
Especially in those communities.
And the consequences of that gap, they're pretty serious. Like, we're talking real life yet packed.
Oh, yeah.
We got some statistics.
Yeah.
And they paint like a pretty unsettling picture.
They do.
Are you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
All right, so get this.
Okay.
90%.
90%.
90% of the incarcerated population is male. But only 20% of reentry programs are designed to meet their specific needs.
That's a huge disconnect.
It's a massive disconnect.
Yeah, and it just highlights, right, that systemic issue.
Yeah, 90%, that's...
It's not just a small difference.
No, that's not a small difference.
It's a major problem.
And it's not just incarceration.
No, it goes beyond that.
Mental health, huge, right?
Huge. And we've got some
Yeah.
really, really tough statistics there, too.
Oh, yeah.
So suicide rates among men way higher than among women.
That's crisis?
It is a crisis, especially in certain areas like the Central Valley.
Oh, yeah. We've got some specific data on that.
We do, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. What is it?
The male suicide rate there is 22 per 100,000.
That's just awful.
It's horrifying.
And despite this crisis, right?
Yeah.
Only 15% of mental health programs are actually designed for men.
Designed with them in mind.
So it's like this huge cry for help.
Yeah.
It's just going unanswered.
And the pattern continues, unfortunately.
Does it?
Yeah. Homelessness, 70% of the homeless population is male.
Wow.
But only 30% of shelters prioritize services for them.
So again, this huge disparity.
Huge.
Between the need and the resources.
It's a wake-up call, for sure.
These numbers are really like they're a punch in the gut.
They are.
Just like men being disproportionately affected by all these, these societal issues.
Yeah.
But not getting the support they need.
It's a silent epidemic.
It is. It really is.
And that brings us to, the big question.
The big question.
Why?
Why are men so underserved?
Why this disconnect between, the need and the support available?
Why?
Our sources, they point to a lot of different reasons. It's complex, but it seems like societal expectations.
Those expectations.
And the stigma around men seeking help, that's at the heart of it.
It's like this unspoken rule.
It is.
That men should just, tough it out.
Yeah.
No matter what.
No matter what they're going through.
But bottling it all up, that's not a solution.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It just makes things worse, right?
It does.
And, traditional masculinity.
With all that emphasis on stoicism, self-reliance, it discourages men from being vulnerable, from seeking help.
They're afraid, right?
Terrified.
Of being seen as weak.
Yeah.
Or like they're failing to live up to this,
this outdated definition.
Yeah, this outdated, rigid definition of what it means to be a man.
What does it even mean?
So many men are just struggling in silence.
Because they think they can't reach out.
Yeah, like without betraying this,
this imaginary code.
Yeah, this code of manhood. It's
ridiculous.
And that stigma, it's everywhere, right?
It permeates everything.
Prevents men from going to the doctor.
Yeah.
Reporting domestic violence, even admitting that they're struggling with their mental health.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is.
And it's not just stigma. We also need to acknowledge that there's a real lack of male-specific services.
That makes sense.
A lot of existing healthcare and support programs, they just aren't designed with men in mind.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
You can't expect men to thrive in systems that aren't made for them.
You can't. And then there are the economic pressures.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in places like the Central Valley. It's tough.
All over.
The burden of being the provider.
Yeah.
Coupled with, high unemployment rates.
Makes it hard.
Pushes men to prioritize work over their well-being.
It's a difficult choice.
It is.
Risking your job to take care of your health.
Nobody wants to do that.
And then that economic instability, right?
Yeah.
Can be made even worse by gaps in education and employment.
Absolutely.
Men on average, they have lower rates of high school and college completion.
Compared to women.
Yeah, which limits their job opportunities.
Their earning potential.
So it's like this domino effect.
It is.
Lack of education leads to fewer jobs, which leads to financial strain, which impacts, mental and physical health.
It's a cycle.
It's a tough cycle to break.
And then we can't forget about the cultural and community factors.
Oh, right.
Men often have smaller social networks.
Really?
Fewer close relationships.
Oh, wow.
Which leads to isolation, reluctance to seek help.
So if there aren't, strong community programs,
right,
support groups specifically for men.
Yeah, that isolation just gets worse.
So it's like they're caught in this web.
Yeah, they are.
Of societal expectations, stigma, systemic barriers.
All of it.
It's no wonder so many men are struggling.
So the question of why men are so underserved, there's no easy answer.
It's complicated.
It's a multifaceted problem.
Yeah.
With deep roots in our culture, our systems, the way we understand masculinity.
It is deep.
But recognizing the problem, that's the first step.
It is.
Towards finding solutions.
So now what?
Now what?
What do we do?
The big question.
How do we address these disparities?
Right? How do we create a more supportive environment for men?
Our sources, they suggest some things, but there's definitely room for debate.
Oh, yeah.
One of the big ones are male-exclusive services. The answer.
That's a tough one.
It is. Because on the one hand,
yeah,
you got the argument that men, they have unique needs, communication styles.
Yeah, they do.
That might be better addressed in, a male-specific setting.
A space where they feel comfortable.
Yeah, where they feel comfortable.
Opening up, seeking support.
Surrounded by other men,
Yeah, guys who get it.
Guys who've been there.
Who understand their experiences.
There's a certain, camaraderie.
There is.
That you get in those spaces.
Shared understanding.
Which could be really helpful for men who are dealing with stuff like addiction, trauma.
Mental health challenges.
Yeah, they might feel less judged.
Absolutely.
Less pressured to conform to those traditional masculine norms.
They can just be themselves.
More willing to be vulnerable.
And proponents of these male-exclusive services, they argue that this targeted approach, it allows for more focused resources.
Oh, okay.
And potentially better outcomes.
So you're saying, by concentrating resources on male-specific issues, these programs can be more efficient, provide higher quality support.
That's the idea.
Makes sense. It's about tailoring the approach, right?
Tailoring it.
To the specific needs of the people you're trying to help.
And when you consider those economic challenges that a lot of men face, especially in these underserved communities.
It becomes even more crucial, right?
Absolutely.
Things like job training programs, financial literacy workshops, mental health services, specifically for men.
Those can be game changers.
They can be lifelines.
It's not just about the skills. It's about rebuilding that confidence. That sense of purpose, that feeling of agency.
That you can take care of yourself, your family.
Exactly. It can have a ripple effect.
So I see how those arguments for male-exclusive services, they gain even more weight when you consider these specific communities.
The context matters.
But then how do we reconcile that with the concerns we talked about before?
Right.
About, potential downsides, perpetuating inequality, reinforcing stereotypes?
Yeah, that's the balancing act.
Is there a way to find that balance?
I think there has to be.
Because it can't be one or the other, right?
It's not either.
It's got to be both.
It's about finding that nuanced approach.
Yeah, addressing the unique needs of men while also, promoting equality.
Inclusivity for everyone.
It's about the whole picture.
The whole picture, not just one piece.
So maybe it's not about choosing one side, right?
No.
It's about integrating both approaches.
Maybe.
Could we improve existing services to be more inclusive while also developing those targeted programs where they're really needed?
I think that's a really good way to think about it.
A two-pronged approach.
Two-pronged.
So on one hand, we got to make sure that all healthcare, mental health, all support programs, they're sensitive to men's needs.
And that they actively combat that stigma.
That stigma, right.
That keeps men from seeking help.
So that means what? Training professionals.
Yeah.
To recognize and address those needs.
Creating resources that speak to men.
That they actually connect with.
Yeah, and challenging those stereotypes.
Masculinity.
Hell on.
So basically making sure that men feel
seen
and heard.
Within the existing systems.
Within those systems.
But at the same time, we have to recognize that sometimes male-exclusive services might be the best way
to reach certain men.
To provide that really specific support.
Like, I'm thinking about, like, support groups.
Yeah.
For men dealing with addiction or, trauma.
And to those job training programs.
Job training, yeah.
For guys who've been incarcerated.
Creating that dedicated space.
Safe space.
Where they can connect with others who really get it.
Who've walked in their shoes.
That can be so powerful.
It can be transformative.
It's about breaking down those barriers of isolation, shame.
Yeah.
Creating an environment where they feel safe, supported.
To heal,
to grow.
It's about meeting men where they are.
Where they are.
Acknowledging the challenges and providing a pathway forward.
So it seems like the key is really finding that balance between inclusivity and targeted support.
It's not one size fits all.
Definitely not one size fits all.
And that balance, it might look different in different communities.
Right. Different needs.
Different resources.
What works in, like, a big city might not work in a rural area.
Exactly.
So being flexible is key.
Being responsive to the needs of the people you're serving.
Yeah, and always, putting their well-being first.
That's the bottom line.
But all this talk about, like, societal shifts, systemic changes.
It's big stuff.
It feels kind of overwhelming,
Yeah.
Like, what can we do as individuals?
That's a question a lot of people have.
What can we do to contribute to this effort?
Well, it's true. These are complex issues.
Yeah.
But even small actions can make a difference.
Okay, so what can we do?
First step, awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah, like what we're doing here.
Talking about it.
Talking about it. Shining a light on these struggles.
That's a good first step.
It's huge.
Just acknowledging that they exist.
Yeah.
And once we're aware,
then what?
We could start challenging those stereotypes.
Absolutely.
In our own lives, in our communities.
Call it out when you see it.
Yeah, like speak up when you hear a joke that perpetuates this idea that men can't be vulnerable or emotional.
Support organizations that are doing good work.
Like the MRC.
Like the MRC, exactly.
And we can encourage the men in our lives to take care of themselves.
To seek help when they need it.
To know that it's okay to not be okay.
That's huge.
It's about creating a culture of support, understanding where men feel safe to be themselves, to ask for help without judgment.
That's a powerful message.
It is. It is.
And I think that's a good place to pause for now.
Yeah. Take a breath.
Take a breath.
Process all this stuff.
Let it sink in.
And when we come back,
we'll dive into
some solutions.
Solutions. Concrete ideas for action.
So you can keep this conversation going.
Beyond our deep dive today.
All right, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Before we jump into solutions,
I
think it's worth, circling back to something we talked about earlier. The economic realities in those underserved communities.
Oh, yeah.
Places like the Central Valley.
The Central Valley.
Our sources, they really painted this, stark picture.
Yeah.
Where unemployment, poverty, they're just way more widespread.
They are.
And men are hit the hardest.
Yeah. It's like those statistics just amplified everything we were talking about.
It all comes together.
When you combine those economic hardships with the pressure on men to be providers.
To be the breadwinner.
Yeah, it's a recipe for, serious stress, which can manifest in a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah, all sorts of ways.
It's not surprising then that areas like the Central Valley, they also see higher rates of substance abuse, mental health issues.
Homelessness.
Yeah, homelessness among men.
It's almost like a direct line, right?
Yeah, it's kind of
from economic struggles to these other challenges.
And that's where those targeted services, like job training programs,
placement programs,
they become even more crucial.
They're lifelines.
Lifelines.
For men trying to get back on their feet.
Yeah, it's not just an option. It's
it's a necessity.
A necessity.
And it's not just about, acquiring practical skills either.
Yeah.
It's about that sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Rebuilding confidence, that feeling of agency.
Yeah, that comes from being able to provide for yourself, for your family.
And to contribute.
To contribute.
That can have such a positive ripple effect.
Oh, yeah. Across a man's entire life is relationships, So I see how those arguments for male-exclusive services, they gain even more weight.
Yeah.
When you consider the specific needs of these communities.
The context is so important.
But then how do we reconcile that with the concerns about potential downsides, perpetuating inequality, reinforcing stereotypes?
It's a tricky balance.
Is there a way to find that balance?
I think there has to be.
Because it can't be one or the other, right?
No, it's not a binary.
It could be both.
Finding that nuanced approach.
So maybe it's not about choosing sides. It's about finding a way to integrate both approaches.
Maybe.
Like improving existing services to be more inclusive.
Yeah.
while also developing those targeted programs.
Where they're needed the most?
So it's like a two-pronged approach, right?
Two-pronged, yeah.
On the one hand,
Okay.
we got to make sure that all healthcare, mental health, support programs, they're sensitive to men's needs.
They need to understand those needs.
And they got to actively combat that stigma.
Oh, that stigma.
That prevents men from seeking help.
Absolutely.
So that means training professionals to recognize and address those needs.
Creating resources.
Resources that actually speak to men.
Speak their language.
That they can connect with.
Yeah, and challenging those stereotypes about masculinity.
Calling it out.
Calling it out, yeah.
So basically, we're making sure that men feel seen and heard.
Within those existing systems.
Within the systems.
But on the other hand,
okay.
We have to recognize
what?
That sometimes male-exclusive services might be the most effective way
to reach those men?
To provide that specific support.
Like those support groups?
Yeah, support groups.
For men dealing with addiction, trauma.
Or those job training programs.
Job training, yeah.
Creating that dedicated space.
A safe space.
Where they can connect with others who've been there.
Who get it.
Who understand.
That can be so powerful.
It can be life-changing.
Breaking down those barriers.
Oh, isolation.
Shame.
Creating an environment where they feel supported.
Safe.
To heal, to grow.
It's about meeting them where they are.
Where they are.
Acknowledging the challenges.
And giving them a path forward.
A path forward, yeah.
So it seems like the key is finding that balance.
The balance.
Between inclusivity and targeted support.
And understanding that it's not one size fits all.
It's not a cookie-cutter approach.
And that balance might look different.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
In different communities.
Different needs, different contexts.
What works in one place might not work in another.
You got to be flexible.
Flexible.
Responsive to the needs of the people you're serving.
And always putting their well-being first.
That's the priority.
It's a lot, though, right?
It is a lot.
All this talk about societal shifts, systemic changes.
It can feel overwhelming.
It can.
But even small actions make a difference.
Okay, so what can we do?
First step, like we said, awareness.
Awareness.
Talking about these issues, bringing them to light.
Shining a light on them.
Acknowledging that they exist.
And once we're aware,
we can start challenging those stereotypes.
For our own lives.
In our families, our communities.
Yeah, call it out when you see it.
Don't let it slide.
Speak up when you hear a joke that perpetuates that harmful idea that, men can't be vulnerable, they can't be emotional.
Right, exactly.
Support organizations that are doing good work.
Like the MRC.
There
are others out there, too.
And we can encourage the men in our lives to take care of themselves.
To prioritize their well-being.
To seek help when they need it.
To know that it's okay to not be okay.
That's huge.
It is. It's about creating that culture of support, understanding.
Where they feel safe.
Safe to be themselves.
To ask for help without judgment.
That's a powerful message, right?
It is a powerful message.
And I think that's a good place to, take a pause.
A pause. Catch our breath.
Let it all sink in.
And when we come back, we'll dive into some solutions.
More concrete ideas.
For actions.
So you can keep this conversation going.
Beyond our deep dive today.
Exactly.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a chance to process all that.
It was a lot to take in.
It was heavy stuff. But I got to say, hearing about all the work that's being done, it's encouraging.
It is. It gives you hope.
It does.
That things can change.
So let's shift gears now. Let's talk solutions.
Okay, solutions.
What can we actually do?
$1 million question.
Both as individuals and, as a society to create a more supportive environment for all genders.
Yeah, because it's not just about men, right? It's about everyone.
It's about everyone.
It's about creating a world where everyone can thrive.
Exactly.
And as we've seen, it's not simple.
It's complicated, but
I think our sources offer some really good starting points.
Okay. What are some of those?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up for me is the need to challenge those outdated ideas of masculinity.
We need to redefine what it means to be a man in today's world.
Absolutely. We've got to move away from the rigid idea that men always have to be stoic, strong, self-reliant.
Yeah, that's the only way to be a man.
It's just not true.
It's limiting.
It's limiting, and it's harmful.
It's okay for men to Express emotions, ask for help, be vulnerable.
Those are signs of strength, not weakness.
That's not weakness, yeah.
It's about giving men permission to be their full human
To be
selves
human.
with all the complexity.
And it starts early, right?
It does.
We got to be teaching boys that it's okay to cry, to be afraid, to talk about their feelings.
Yeah, we need to encourage them to develop healthy coping mechanisms.
So they don't just bottle it all up.
Exactly. And to understand that seeking support, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength.
It takes strength to ask for help.
It does.
And it's not just about boys either, right?
No, we need to have these conversations with girls too.
With girls, yeah.
Teaching them to respect and value the full range of human emotions, regardless of gender.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
Exactly.
We've got to dismantle those harmful stereotypes that limit us all.
They do limit us all.
Men and women.
And then, of course, we need to address those systemic barriers
The systems.
that make it so hard for men to access support.
We talked about the lack of male-specific services.
Right?
But it's also about making sure that existing services are more accessible, more inclusive.
So training healthcare providers to
to
recognize men's unique needs.
This is it.
Making sure mental health services are welcoming, culturally sensitive,
Yeah, a safe space.
and designing social support programs with men in mind.
It's like we need to do a design audit of those systems,
That's a great way to put it.
figure out where the friction points are for men, and then smooth them out.
Make it easier for them to get the help they need.
And then funding.
Funding is
You
huge,
got to make sure there are enough resources available to meet men's needs.
especially in those underserved communities.
Where the challenges are even greater,
Absolutely.
it's an investment,
It is an investment.
not an expense.
Investing in men's well-being benefits everyone.
It does. It really does.
And while we're talking about changing the narrative,
Yeah.
I think it's important to promote positive role models,
I love that.
showcasing men who are breaking down those stereotypes,
Men who are leading by example.
embracing vulnerability, emotional intelligence, advocating for equality.
We need to see more of that.
We do.
We need to celebrate those men.
Lift them up.
Show the younger generation that there's more than one way to be a man.
More than one way to be a good man.
It can be as simple as sharing their stories, supporting their work, calling out those harmful representations of masculinity that we see in the media.
Or even in our own lives.
In our own lives, yeah.
It's about consciously creating a new narrative, a more nuanced, inclusive understanding of what it means to be a man in today's world.
That's powerful.
It is, and it's necessary.
So, real change requires a multifaceted approach.
It does.
Challenging stereotypes, addressing those systemic barriers, promoting positive role models, building a culture of support where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
That's it in a nutshell.
It's a lot,
It is.
but it's worth it.
It's absolutely worth it.
And it's a long-term effort, right?
Oh, yeah. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
We got to keep pushing forward.
Keep having those conversations.
Keep striving for that more equitable and just world.
For everyone.
For everyone.
Well said.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Time flies.
It does. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but this is just the beginning of the conversation.
It's an ongoing conversation.
We hope this has given you some food for thought, some things to consider,
Yeah, some new perspectives.
and we encourage you to keep learning, to challenge your own assumptions
To be an advocate for change.
in your own life.
In your community.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep those questions flowing, keep learning, and keep working to make the world a better place for everyone.
That's all we can ask.